G'day and welcome to Does It Matter? Today I'm going to talk about a subject that's pretty close to my mind and my heart, and I've had this conversation many times with people close to me, and that is the MGTOW movement, which has sprouted from the red pill concept that is in itself a direct reaction to the feminist intersectionalist vitriolic, which has swept its largely man-hating, hate-filled dialogue across Western culture for the last 50, 60 years. And the MGTOW and the red pill are responses to it. I am not red pill, neither am I MGTOW, though I espouse some of their beliefs the same way as I like some aspects of Weberianism. I can read Immanuel Kant and enjoy some of his ideas. I can draw things from continental philosophy, from Buddhism, without requiring myself to be a follower of those particular ways of thinking. I steadfastly refuse to become entrenched in a tribalistic way of thinking. I draw good ideas together that make sense. The closest school that you could probably connect me to is Stoicism and some aspects of Zen. They will be the closest ones that I draw nearest to in my thinking. Nonetheless, I see MGTOW and red pill as a perfectly reasonable response by men, and a very mild response by comparison to previous cultural responses in history. Is a very mild response to a very extreme reaction by feminism. Now, feminists were themselves reacting to legitimate abuses, but also to a completely changing stratosphere of human society. And they framed a lot of things that were not abusive and that were completely the opposite, protective. They framed them in such a way that everything in history begins to look like oppression. And we see the same thing with CRT and CT, not going into that, that's a different video, with ethnicity, where we begin to look at everything as oppression. The foolish thing being that the greatest oppression that there is our struggle with nature, our struggle with our own human nature, and our struggle with the outer nature of the universe. These are the true oppressors, the mind within and the forces without. Our struggles with each other are tiny by comparison. Nonetheless, that's a tangent for another video. MGTOW, red pill. The average male has a 56% chance in Australia of being divorced within 10 to 12 years, 15 years at the outside. If most couples today are separated, and most couples today are not married, they have children, they passed people married with children, I think it was 2018, 2017 in Australia. Most other countries are the same. There are more people now who live together, cohabit, not married, not formally married, who have children. And their separation rate is horrific, depending on the demographic, the income socioeconomic demographic. It gets worse as you get lower. It can be somewhere between 70 and 90%. If you average that out, and you look at children between 10 and 15 living in separate homes, the average family has a 7 to 8 times out of 10, or 70 to 80% chance of being split before the children are 18, well before the children are 18 in most cases. So the average male today is looking at a lot of sad dads, a lot of broken fathers, and wondering what the hell is in store for them. Hence the popularity of the red pill and MGTOW, because it doesn't look good. And the reality is that whether or not 1 in 3 espoused by so many feminists, which isn't actually strictly correct either. It's been debunked a number of times. Nonetheless, let's assume it's true. I've been assaulted by almost every person I've ever been in a relationship with, repeatedly in some cases, many, often, okay? I would argue that DV, that spousal battery, is a common human problem, and the statistics that you can collect, like the PASC study, amongst a couple of others, a recent Canadian study, a very big German European study, only about 2 years old, millions of people, found that women were far more likely to batter their partners than the other way around. So if we're going to talk about spousal abuse as a cause for a relationship breakdown, one, it occurs in such a tiny percentage of population it's not funny. Two, it seems to be a universal common problem, and one that's suffered more by women than men, as in they execute that violence more commonly than men do. When men do it, it's much more dreadful in results. Nonetheless, it's a terrible thing either way. But most people aren't doing that. Most people aren't hitting each other. They're not coming home drunk and vomiting all over their own couch every day. They're not engaging in infidelity at least until near the end of their relationship. Most people aren't doing that. They're not doing those things. They're not doing things that will constitute any reasonable interpretation of abuse. They're just being human. And that's no excuse. But at the same time, we have become a fickle society, hedonistic, consumeristic society, where if you're not feeling butterflies and tingles, if you're not feeling what you want to feel, you're not getting everything that you want to get, and you see other people that are, and oh my God, Instagram and the internet have so much to be accountable for. The absolute bullshit promulgated over the internet that makes people think that other people are happier than them, wake up. They're probably not. Some people are really good at advertising how happy they are. Some people are really good at advertising how good their lives are. Most of their lives are not that good. There are some startling deficits in their lives that you'll never see or hear about because it's not in their interest to tell you or show you. Nonetheless, people have believed it. They buy it. We're a consumer culture. We're struck with affluenza. We're constantly thinking the grass is greener. And women, as 80%, who are responsible for 80% of purchases globally, have been heavily targeted by marketing and massive companies and corporate companies and marketing and commerce. They've been targeted. They can use neuro-linguistic programming or for all kinds of other clever psychological tricks. And they've been really successful. The corporate world has also actively engaged in the divisive internecine nature of intersectionalism and feminism, and CRT later on. Different kettle, fish, different video. But nonetheless, these moribund, intellectually bankrupt ideas have been adopted wholesale without any kind of critical thinking, without any kind of reason applied. And we see the result now, which is that 72% of boys are skewing towards conservative. Men used to be fairly well balanced politically, and now they're swinging heavily towards the right. It's not a surprise. As a left-leaning man, I find this dismaying. I would prefer to see us, most people mainly in the middle, with only the fringes wandering too far left or right. And what we're seeing is the opposite. We're seeing more and more women moving to the left and more men moving to the right. It's not really good. Okay? And it's a sign, more importantly, because it'll correct itself eventually, but it's a sign of reaction to counter-reaction. We need to stop reacting. We need to stop acting like dumb monkeys and start thinking like the sapiens, Homo sapien, the sapient forward-thinking creatures we're supposed to be. Which brings me to why men are reacting the way they're reacting, particularly young men. And I address this to young men in particular. Young women are choosing in record numbers to not have children early, to leave it late. I don't believe women having the kind of reactions to children that men are having. Most women still want to have children, well over 80%. It's close to 90. Still want to have children. They just wait too long. Many of them wait too long, and there's a disaster coming down the track, not far down the track at all, that will leave so many poor souls deprived of family, which is the greatest thing ever, by far. I've done a lot of good things in my life. I've been quite successful in various fields, but my children trump everything. Everything. They are my greatest work, so to speak, and they are my greatest privilege to guide and assist. And to have not had them, my life would be empty by comparison. I wouldn't say it would be worthless, but it would be far less than what it is. And so many women are going to miss out because of the absolute perfidious lies that told them that they could just delay childbirth into their 30s and it'll be okay. That's probably more for another video, other than to say that most females' fertility is half gone by 30. That's a fact. Can't deny it. It just is what it is. That between 30 and 40, women develop significant problems outside of their fertility to do with carrying, to do with conceiving and carrying. Fallopian tube issues, encysting issues, womb and uterine issues, hormonal issues, weight issues, all of which make conception much, much harder and successful pregnancies much less likely. So we've lied to women. Our society has done so in order to encourage them to stay longer in the workforce, to favour a career, and told them that they could do it all. And that's not true. It's not possible to do it all. Not for men, not for women. You can't. You have to make choices. And with choices come sacrifices. And we were told that that wasn't the case. Okay? Men were fooled by this too, because I think if we knew how much sadness was coming down the track for our mothers, our sisters, our friends, our spouses, we would not have tolerated this lie, these sets of lies, these statistically impossible biological denial of lies. We wouldn't have tolerated it, but we did. Probably weren't paying attention either, you know? We're just monkeys after all in that respect. We have seen that most women are delaying childbirth and men are no longer interested in childbirth. 72% of men in Australia, it's in the high 70s and the high 60s in America, it's the high 70s in many European countries, have no interest in having children at all, have no interest in cohabiting or marrying. We've never seen figures like that before. They're colossal. 30% of men are virgins. Over a third of men are virgins at 30. There's such a massive withdrawal from society. I don't think it's good. I don't think red pill and MGTOW reactions to this are good, but they are logical reactions to the incredible likelihood of catastrophic failure in our relational stakes. If you're going to have a 70 to 80 or even 90% failure rate in marriage and relationships, and you're going to be a single dad, which is most likely, most men will be single dads, are becoming single dads now and will continue to become single dads into the coming decades. No one wants that. All these young men are watching dads like me go through hellfire and agony. They watch their parents go through hell. They don't want that. Why on earth would they want that? Why would they want that? And they don't want to do that to their progeny. They'd rather have no progeny than do that. That's heartbreaking. No father like myself or my friends, most of whom are divorced or separated, want this for our children. We still want to believe in romance. We still want to believe that love conquers all. But we unfortunately know that in this culture, love doesn't conquer all. It just doesn't. Not in a culture that's dominated by fickle consumerism, by butterflies and tingles and no substance, by checklists, by swiping, and by all the other superficial paraphernalia that keeps us granularized, atomized, and separate. What do I say to my son? Do I encourage him to get married and run like a lemming over the cliff? Or do I tell him to make the best of his life and be alone? Because that will be less painful. And I can tell you that now, it will be far less painful than the alternative. The best I can think of is the middle line. You will have to choose to either accept that you will be a single father, most likely, at some point. You will be thrown in the bin. 80 to 90% of relationships are ended by women in these modern times. You will be thrown in the bin and you will be a single dad. And just be grateful that you have children. That's the best that I can come up with. And I cannot describe as a father how horrifying that is to have to tell my son, and I've had to tell some young men that recently. You've got a choice. Be a single dad, most likely, or never cohabit, never have a long-term relationship that involves children, because then you minimize the amount of trauma and catastrophe that can be impacted upon your life, and you can keep it as peaceful and harmonious as possible. I don't know what else to say. I don't know what else I can say other than try and walk that middle line and give people choices, and then people can follow those choices to the best of their ability. It's a lousy one. There's no good answer here. There's no decent answer here for any of us, male or female. I think that in some respects, the conversations I have with my daughter are a lot easier. I've told her to over and over again, and she's seen the evidence for it, because I use evidence to back my arguments, not just feelings and opinions or anecdotal experience, that maintaining her health and looking for a good partner, be very discerning, be very specific in what she looks for in terms of a high quality male, a good man. And that doesn't mean money or looks or anything else. Okay, it's got more to do with his inner world, his inner character, his ability to be reliable, his ability to be kind, to be sweet, to be considerate and insightful, to be strong, to be stoic. Those things are far more important than some of the other standards that men are held to. She should find someone like that, make some beautiful children, and at the very least, they will both have children to treasure into the future, and they are far more likely to be happy together as well. For my son, I don't know what to say, other than to tell you what I already said before. Roll the dice and be prepared for a very likely snake eyes, or lead a singular life and make good networks with your brothers, have lots of friends of all denominations and all genders, but don't cohabit, don't get married, and don't allow anyone to roll grenades into your private life. They're both pretty lousy choices if you ask me, but that is why MGTOW exists. That is why the red pill has become so popular, because the actual realistic statistics, the actual real numbers, and anyone who's opening their eyes and looking around can see the interrelational catastrophe that has been ongoing for 20 odd years, last 25 years in particular. It's been happening for well over 40 years, but the last 25 years has been stunning, and it's getting worse. Grey divorce is just going through the roof. FOMO, grass is greener over there mentality has just got a lot to answer for, So when you hear people talk about MGTOW and red pill and such, and often in traditional media in disparaging terms, I want you to understand where it might be coming from. Do I agree with everything they say? No, I don't agree with it. I love continental philosophy, I love Buddhism, but I don't agree with everything that comes from the sages' mouths. I don't agree with anything from anyone. I take information critically, and I read it critically, and I read it logically, and I apply evidence to it as best as I can. I don't believe in being tribalistic in my thinking, and I implore you all to do the same thing. Drop your ideologies. Drop your religions if you can. Live bravely. Live in limbo. Live in uncertainty. Live with doubt. It's really important to do that. It makes you stronger, and it also makes you more honest, more willing to face unpleasant realities. Trust me, it really does. However, at this point in time, the unpleasant reality that our children have to face is why these philosophies are flourishing and will continue to flourish until society adjusts so much that they are no longer a troubling reality for us. I don't know how that's going to come about. I have some ideas, and that will certainly be in another video that I'm already beginning to work on. Solutions are always much more pleasant to work on than the problems that the solutions are required for. But this one was more a discussion about why you're hearing a lot about MGTOW, red pill, and the black pill, and all those other pills. Don't worry too much about that. Research it if you wish. It's predominantly about a very reasonable reaction. And that doesn't mean they're all right. Doesn't mean that they're correct on everything at all. Far from it. But it's a reasonable reaction to an extreme ideological permutation that has swept Western culture and now the world for the last, probably better part of the last century, and has become steadily more radical, as revolutionary movements always do, especially when they have good reasons. When there is some standing, some, not all, but some standing for their claims against the so-called patriarchy. But all revolutions tend to become toxic. All of them. They all tend to become hateful and malicious and ontologically self-justifying. They become epistemologies of hate. And I love my son. I love men. I love women. I will not brook hatred against either. It's worthless. It does us no good. And I have seen far too much hate against men and masculinity. I'm a masculine male. Most people understand that. Anyone who knows me understands that. I'm pretty masculine. I'm unadulteratedly the way I am, and I'm not toxic at all. Not even slightly. Doesn't mean I can't be a douchebag on occasion, but that's part of the human condition. It has nothing to do with my masculinity and everything to do with the fact that I'm a barely semi-evolved monkey, as are we all. Please, give it some thought. Give it a bit of thought, spend a bit of time on it, and when you hear these phrases bandied around the media and social media, take them with a pinch of salt, or at least look into them and do some research. But understand that this is a reaction. Young men have gloomy prospects at the moment, and that means that the prospects for humanity as a whole are not great interrelationally. There's a lot of good things on the horizon, technology-wise, science-wise, but when it comes to how we handle each other, we're doing a really shit job at the moment, and that's the truth. Is it all women's fault? No. Is it all men's fault? Far from it. It's our responsibility. It's not even our fault. That's a stupid way of looking at it. But we are doing shit to each other we shouldn't be doing. We are treating each other in ways, we're treating each other like objects rather than like unrepeatable fingerprints of the universe, in which we are. No. So let's treat each other a little more like the wonderful creatures that we are, and let's try and give these boys in particular more hope for the future. Okay? We need to learn to make commitments and keep them, and to do what's necessary to keep our families intact and whole. I don't think the way we're doing things is working, and most people would agree. Certainly people on the tail end of this would agree, and that's hundreds of millions of us. So let's try and do a better job and give our children some more hope. So I don't have to keep presenting young men and young women too, because they're on the other side of this, with some really lousy choices. Let's do better. Us.